For 6 days, the soldiers outside Jericho did not speak a single word. They only marched, once around the city, then straight back to camp, in total silence. On the 7th day, that changed. They circled the city 7 times, and on the last pass, the horns sounded and everyone shouted at once. What happened in the seconds after that shout ended thousands of years of history for one of the oldest cities ever built. This is the story of Jericho, and the 6 days of silence that came before its walls fell. Long before Joshua ever saw its walls, Jericho was already ancient. Archaeologists have found a stone tower here dating back nearly 10,000 years, among the oldest built structures on the planet. Its earliest residents even plastered human skulls into lifelike portraits, some of the oldest art of its kind ever found. By the time the Israelites arrived, the city had already been built, destroyed, and rebuilt more times than anyone could count. It sat beside a natural desert spring. That spring made Jericho fertile, wealthy, and worth defending, which is exactly why its walls were built so high. Some sections of its fortifications rose over 20 feet, backed by a steep earthen rampart that made climbing them even harder. Jericho also guarded the gateway into the hill country beyond. Whoever held this city controlled the door to everywhere else in Canaan. Every city Israel would eventually have to take stood somewhere between them and the rest of the land, but Jericho was the very first. If this first city could not be taken, the entire campaign to enter Canaan might end before it had properly begun. For 40 years, an entire generation of Israelites had wandered the wilderness, waiting to enter a land none of them had ever seen. Moses had died in sight of it, on a mountain across the river, without ever setting foot inside. Now Joshua led them instead. He had no siege towers, no battering rams, and no experience taking a fortified city like this one. Directly between his people and the rest of the promised land stood Jericho, gates shut, walls high, watching. How do you defeat a city that had already survived everything else history had thrown at it? Before any of that could happen, Israel first had to cross the river separating them from the land itself. The Jordan was in full flood. Joshua ordered the priests to carry the Ark of the Covenant to the water's edge, ahead of everyone else. The moment their feet touched the river, the text says, the water upstream stopped flowing entirely, piling up far in the distance. The entire nation crossed on dry ground, with the riverbed exposed on either side of the priests still standing in the middle. Joshua had 12 stones pulled from the riverbed. 1 stone for each tribe, stacked into a monument at their first camp, a marker meant to outlast the memory of the men who built it. For the people watching, the crossing did something else too. It told them, unmistakably, that Joshua now carried Moses' authority. The real problem was still standing ahead of them. Before crossing, Joshua had already sent 2 men into Jericho to scout the city in secret. They slipped through the gates and by nightfall, found lodging in the house of a woman named Rahab. Her house was unusual. It was built directly into the thickness of the city wall, its windows facing out over open country. Rahab ran an inn at the edge of the city, exactly the kind of place where travelers gossip and rumor pass through daily. What she chose to do next carried a death sentence of its own. Sheltering enemy spies was treason, and soldiers were standing right outside her door. Someone recognized the strangers. Word reached the king of Jericho that 2 Israelite men were hiding inside Rahab's house that very night. Soldiers pounded on her door. They demanded she hand the men over immediately, on the king's own orders. Instead, Rahab hid the 2 spies under stalks of flax drying on her roof, and lied directly to the king's soldiers. She told them the men had already left the city, and sent the soldiers chasing shadows toward the river. Only once the danger passed did she climb back up. She told the spies something that changed the entire tone of the conversation. Jericho already knew exactly who they were dealing with. News of the sea that parted, and of kings already defeated east of the Jordan, had reached the city long before the spies had. Her people's courage had already failed. I know the Lord has given you this land, she told them, and everyone here is terrified of you. In exchange for saving their lives, she asked for exactly one thing, that her own family be spared when the city fell. The spies agreed on one condition: she had to tie a scarlet cord in her window and gather everyone inside before the attack came. Then she lowered them down. Using a rope through her own window, she let the two men down the outside of the city wall into the darkness below. She told them to hide in the hills for 3 days, until the soldiers searching for them gave up and went home. They did exactly that, then crossed back to report to Joshua everything they had seen and heard inside the city. Every person in the land, they said, was already afraid. The battle might be half won before it even began. Jericho was finally within reach. Before any battle plan came, Joshua encountered a stranger standing near the city, holding a drawn sword. When Joshua asked whose side the man was on, he answered neither. He had come as commander of the Lord's own army. Joshua fell face down on the ground, and what he heard next would shape everything that followed. The instructions made no military sense at all. March around the city once a day, with priests carrying the sacred ark at the center of the column. 7 priests would carry ram's horn trumpets, and every soldier was ordered to stay completely silent. No shouting. No war cries. No words. Do this, Joshua was told, once a day for 6 days in a row. No one explained why. On day 1, they marched. The trumpets sounded, the ark moved forward, and thousands of armed men circled the city without a single sound. Then they simply walked back to camp. Inside Jericho, the gates stayed barred shut, and the defenders watched from the walls for an attack that never came. On day 2, it happened again. Same silence, same slow circle around the walls, same return to camp, with still no explanation offered to anyone. By day 3, the novelty had worn off. Some of the men marching, no doubt, had started to wonder whether their commander actually had a plan at all. Day 4 passed exactly the same way. So did day 5. Some historians think the silent marching was itself a form of psychological warfare, designed to fray Jericho's nerve before a single weapon was drawn. Whether that was the original intent or not, 6 days of dread would have taken its own toll on the men behind those walls. Inside the city, the waiting had become its own kind of torment, not knowing what a silent army circling your walls, day after day, was actually building toward. Some defenders likely believed it was a bluff, a piece of theater meant to unsettle them before a conventional attack came instead. Others may not have slept at all. On day 6, they marched once more. Still nothing happened, and still, no one but Joshua knew exactly what the 7th day would bring. On the 7th day, everything changed. Joshua told the soldiers to rise before dawn and prepare to march one final time. But today, he said, they would not circle the city once. They would do it 7 times, one after another, without stopping. They marched the first time. Then the second. The third circle passed in the same silence as every day before it. 4th, 5th, 6th. By the 6th circle, everyone inside the city and out must have sensed that something had finally shifted. Then came the 7th. As the final circle closed, Joshua gave the order 6 days of silence had been building toward. Shout, he told them. The Lord has given you this city. The 7 priests raised their horns together and blew one long, final blast that shattered 6 days of silence at once. Every soldier who had marched without a word for 6 straight days shouted at the exact same moment. And the wall of Jericho, one of the oldest fortifications on earth, collapsed where it stood. There was no battering ram. No siege tower, no breach, no ladder. Just a shout, a horn blast, and a wall that had stood for centuries falling in an instant. Dust rose over the rubble as the Israelite army walked straight through the gap Joshua had promised them. Defenders who had watched 6 days of silent marching now faced an army pouring through a gap that had not existed minutes earlier. There was no time to regroup. The city that had stood through millennia of sieges, famines, and rebuildings fell to Israel in a single, chaotic morning. Before anything else, 2 men ran ahead. They were looking for one specific house, the one with a scarlet cord tied in its window. Rahab and every member of her family were pulled out alive, exactly as the spies had sworn to her days earlier. She was the only household in Jericho to survive that morning because of a promise made in secret before the walls ever fell. The rest of the city did not survive. Joshua ordered the city itself destroyed completely and pronounced a curse on anyone who ever tried to rebuild it. Jericho's first walls were gone. Rahab's story did not end that morning. She was absorbed into the Israelite community, married, and, according to later genealogies, became an ancestor of King David himself. Centuries later, one gospel goes further. Matthew's genealogy of Jesus names Rahab directly, placing a Canaanite woman from a doomed city inside the family line of the Messiah. But what does the ground itself say? Jericho has been excavated more than almost any site in the region, and the results have never fully agreed with each other. Archaeologists call a mound like this a tell. Each layer inside represents a different era of settlement, stacked one on top of the last across thousands of years. In the 1930s, archaeologist John Garstang dug into the ruins and announced he had found exactly what the story described. He dated a collapsed double wall system to around 1400 BC, right around the time the Bible places Joshua's conquest. For a while, the case seemed closed. Then, in the 1950s, archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon reopened the site using far more careful, modern excavation methods. Her deep, narrow trenching technique for reading a site's layers became the archaeological standard used at excavations worldwide afterward. Her pottery analysis pointed to an uncomfortable conclusion. The walls Garstang found had likely collapsed over a century too early to match Joshua at all. Worse, her evidence suggested Jericho may have been largely abandoned by the exact period the Bible's timeline requires it to be a fortified city. The debate has never fully closed since. Later researcher Bryant would re-examine Kenyon's own pottery data and argued her dating had actually been too conservative. The presence of one imported pottery style, Cypriot bichrome ware, became one of the most argued over chronological clues in the entire dispute. One detail became especially important to Wood's case. The city's grain silos were found still full when the destruction layer was excavated. That detail matters because a long siege should have emptied those stores completely. Attacking armies almost always looted grain first, not burned it. A short conquest, followed by deliberate destruction rather than plunder, fits oddly well with a specific detail from the biblical account itself. The Israelites had been ordered not to loot the city. Everything inside Jericho, according to the text, was meant to be devoted to destruction rather than taken as spoil. Full granaries, deliberately burned, is unusual. Radiocarbon testing on that same burnt grain has added more data since, without settling the argument either way. Newer calibration techniques applied to those same samples have pulled some estimates back toward Garstang's original dating, not Kenyon's. Neither camp has fully backed down. Some scholars go further still, doubting a single sudden conquest happened here at all, and reading the story instead as a later national origin legend. Others argue that missing evidence simply reflects how much of the original site was eroded or dug away carelessly before modern methods existed. Defenders of a historical conquest point to the Merneptah stele, an Egyptian inscription from around 1207 BC that names Israel as already in Canaan. That inscription never mentions Jericho by name, but it does confirm Israel existed as a people in the land by a verifiable date. Neither side has produced a knockout blow. Almost a century after the first excavation, historians and archaeologists still disagree about exactly when and how Jericho's walls actually fell. New excavation seasons, using techniques Garstang and Kenyon never had access to, continue at the site even now. Ground-penetrating radar and refined dating methods keep testing the same question those two archaeologists first clashed over nearly a century ago. Today, the ruins sit quiet. Tourists walk over the same mound where Garstang and Kenyon dug decades apart, reaching different conclusions from the same dirt. Why does the dating of one collapsed Bronze Age wall matter so much to so many people, nearly a century after anyone first asked the question? Because Jericho sits exactly where faith and verifiable history are forced to meet, and neither side has ever fully closed the case. The walls of Jericho came down in silence, according to the story, and the argument over that moment has never gone quiet since.